Why would the United Earth Command send a single person to face a fleet that destroyed 3 star systems? General Krell stood on the bridge of the Devourer. The deck vibrated under his heavy boots. Outside the massive glass viewscreen, the sky of Earth burned a deep orange. Thousands of alien ships filled the orbit. They looked like jagged teeth ready to bite the world in half. Krell sneered. His skin was the color of old bruises. He looked at the sensor screens. The human defense grid was dead. Their moons were silent. A small light blinked on the main console. A scout officer turned his head. He looked confused. He said that a single object was moving toward the flagship. It was not a missile. It was not a fighter wing. It was a tiny metal capsule. It was the size of a storage crate. It had no weapons. It had no shields. It drifted through the graveyard of destroyed human frigates. Krell laughed. The sound was like grinding stones. He called the humans cowards. He said they were sending a gift to beg for mercy. He ordered his gunners to stay their hands. He wanted to see this joke up close. The capsule sent a short transmission. It was a simple set of coordinates. It requested a docking bay. Krell nodded to his guards. He told them to prepare the bay. He wanted to kill the messenger with his own hands. In the docking bay, the air was thick with the smell of ozone and burnt fuel. 24 alien soldiers stood in a circle. They held long energy rifles. Their armor hissed as steam escaped the cooling vents. The heavy bay doors groaned open. The vacuum of space sucked at the loose debris on the floor before the air shield stabilized. The small capsule floated inside. It landed with a loud metallic thud. The metal of the capsule was scarred and blackened. It looked like it had been dragged through a furnace. For a long minute, nothing happened. The alien soldiers moved closer. Their fingers stayed on their triggers. They were tense. They expected a bomb. They expected a trap. A seam appeared on the side of the capsule. Air hissed out in a white cloud. A man stepped out. He was not a giant. He was not wearing shining gold armor. He was a soldier named Ben Carter. He looked tired. His face was covered in grease and sweat. His eyes were bloodshot. He wore a heavy gray suit that looked too big for him. The suit made a low hum. It was a sound that stayed in the teeth. It never stopped. Ben Carter stumbled as his boots hit the deck. He did not look like a hero. He looked like a man who had been told he was going to die. He looked at the circle of guns pointed at his head. His breath came in short, jagged gasps. He did not reach for a weapon. He did not have one. General Krell walked into the bay. He was twice the size of the human. He looked down at Ben Carter with pure hate. He asked where the Earth Army was hiding. He asked if this was the best Earth could do. Ben Carter did not answer. He looked at the floor. His hands were shaking. The humming sound from his suit grew louder. It started to rattle the metal floor plates under the alien soldiers. One guard stepped forward and shoved the butt of a rifle into Ben's ribs. Ben fell to his knees. He coughed, and a small drop of blood hit the floor. Krell reached down and grabbed Ben by the throat. He lifted the human off the ground. He told Ben that Earth would burn by morning. Ben Carter finally looked up. His eyes were not full of fear anymore. They were full of a cold, dark weight. He reached out a shaking hand. He did not grab Krell. He reached past the general and pressed his palm against the main wall of the ship. The humming sound suddenly stopped. The entire flagship went pitch black. The darkness in the docking bay lasted only 5 seconds. Red emergency lights flickered on. They cast a bloody glow over the metal walls. General Krell still held Ben Carter by the throat. He looked at the walls in shock. His ship had never lost power before. He dropped Ben to the floor. Ben landed hard on his side. He gasped for air and clutched his chest. The alien guards shouted to each other. They raised their rifles. The weapons hummed as they tried to charge up, but the blue energy coils stayed dim. The rifles were dead. One guard pulled his trigger repeatedly. Nothing happened. He slammed the weapon against a metal crate in anger. Krell looked at the human on the floor. Ben Carter lay still for a moment. His gray suit began to glow with a faint, pulsing light. The suit was no longer humming. It was singing. It was a high-pitched noise that made the aliens cover their ears. Ben forced himself to stand up. His legs were weak. He leaned against the bulkhead for support. Every time he touched the ship, the red lights around him turned a bright, clean white. Krell pulled a jagged metal blade from his belt. He did not need electronics to kill. He stepped toward Ben. He called Ben a thief and a rat. He promised to peel the suit off Ben's skin. The general swung the blade. Ben flinched and moved his head. The blade cut into the wall next to his ear. Sparks flew. Ben did not fight back with his fists. He scrambled away, heading toward the main corridor. He moved like a man who was terrified, but had a job to do. His boots made heavy, rhythmic sounds on the deck. He reached a heavy blast door. Usually, it required a high-level security code. Ben simply touched the control panel. The door hissed and slid open instantly. Krell screamed an order to his men. He told them to use their blades. He told them to stop the human before he reached the main elevators. The guards chased Ben into the narrow hallway. The walls were lined with thick cables and glowing pipes. As Ben ran past them, the pipes began to shake. The liquid inside turned from green to a hot, angry purple. Ben reached a junction. 3 guards blocked his path. They held long spears made of black glass. They lunged at him. Ben ducked low. He slid across the metal floor. His suit brushed against a power terminal. A bolt of electricity jumped from the wall into his suit. Ben screamed in pain. His body jerked as the power flowed through him. The guards stopped. They watched as the electricity did not kill the human. It seemed to be absorbed by the suit. Ben's eyes were wide and filled with tears. He looked at his hands. They were glowing. He looked at the guards. He did not want to hurt them. He looked like he wanted to go home. He stood up and pointed his hand at the ceiling. A surge of energy shot upward. The ceiling panels exploded. Fire and smoke filled the hallway. The guards were knocked back by the blast. Ben did not wait. He turned and ran toward the center of the ship. He reached the heavy doors of the engine room. He stopped and leaned his forehead against the cold metal. He was sobbing now. The suit was getting hotter. He could smell his own skin starting to blister under the fabric. Krell appeared at the end of the hallway. He was covered in soot. He held his blade tight. He told Ben that there was nowhere left to run. He said the human was a walking bomb that would fail. Ben looked back at the general. He placed both hands on the engine room door. The metal began to melt under his fingers. The entire ship groaned, as if it were a living animal in pain. Ben looked at Krell and spoke for the first time. He said that he was not the bomb. He said he was the door. The engine room doors tore open with a sound of screaming metal. A blinding light poured out from the center of the ship. The blinding light from the engine room forced General Krell to shield his eyes. He stumbled back as the heat hit his face. Ben Carter did not move. He stood in the doorway while the light washed over him. His gray suit was no longer dull. It looked like liquid silver. Ben stepped into the heart of the ship. The engine room was a massive cavern of spinning rings and glowing cores. This was the power source for the entire fleet. Hundreds of cables ran from this room to the communication towers and weapon bays. Ben walked toward the main control pillar. His footsteps left scorched marks on the floor. Krell recovered and charged into the room. He shouted for his guards to follow. He swung his metal blade at Ben's back. The blade hit the suit and bounced off with a loud ring. It felt like hitting a mountain. Ben did not even turn around. He reached the pillar and pressed his palms into the glass surface of the main computer. The ship let out a deep, low howl. The sound echoed through the metal floors and walls. Every screen in the room turned white. Then, a voice began to speak. It was not an alien voice. It was a calm, human female voice. It was the Earth Command AI. The voice said that the link was established. Krell froze. He watched as his ship's data flowed into Ben's suit. The alien computer was fighting back, but it was losing. The human AI was like a predator. It moved through the alien wires with impossible speed. Ben's body began to shake violently. His teeth clattered together. The suit was feeding him too much data. He was the bridge between two worlds, and the bridge was starting to crack. On the bridge of the ship, the crew screamed. Their controls were locked. They watched their view screen as the other ships in the fleet began to behave strangely. The alien ships were turning. They were not aiming at the planet anymore. They were aiming at each other. In the engine room, Krell grabbed a heavy metal pipe. He smashed it against Ben's helmet. The glass visor cracked. Ben fell to one knee, but he kept his hands on the pillar. He looked at Krell through the crack in his mask. One of Ben's eyes was bleeding. He looked terrified. He was crying out in pain, but he did not let go. Krell realized the truth. Ben was not controlling the ship. The suit was using Ben's nervous system to bypass the alien firewalls. Ben was a living fuse. If Krell killed the man, the connection might break. Krell raised the pipe for a final blow. The human voice from the computer spoke again. It announced that the hive link was fully open. The voice said that the broadcast was ready. Ben looked at Krell and whispered that it was over. A massive surge of blue light shot out from the pillar. It traveled through Ben's arms and into his chest. His back arched until his bones popped. The energy did not stay in the room. It shot up into the ship's giant antenna. Outside in the vacuum of space, a massive pulse of blue energy exploded from the flagship. It hit the nearest destroyer. Then it jumped to the next ship, and the next. It was a chain reaction. Within seconds, every ship in the alien fleet was connected by a web of human code. Krell looked at his own hands. His digital wrist display was flickering with human words. The words said that the fleet was now under Earth control. Krell looked at Ben. The human soldier was still attached to the pillar, but his suit was turning black. The smell of burning wires filled the air. Suddenly, the main engines of the flagship roared to life at full power. The ship lurched forward. Krell was thrown against the wall. He looked at the main screen, and his face went pale. The entire fleet was moving. They were not attacking Earth. They were turning around to face their own world. The flagship groaned as it moved. The metal floor tilted at a sharp angle. General Krell slid across the deck and slammed into a cooling pipe. He scrambled to his feet, his breath coming in ragged snarls. He looked at Ben Carter. The human was still fused to the control pillar. Smoke rose from the seams of Ben's gray suit. His head hung low, and his fingers were locked onto the glass panel like claws. Every screen in the engine room flashed with rapid lines of red code. Outside, the view through the observation ports was a nightmare of fire and metal. The alien ships were no longer a disciplined fleet. They were colliding. One massive cruiser turned its heavy cannons and fired point-blank into the side of a smaller carrier. The explosion rocked the flagship. The shockwave sent a shower of sparks from the ceiling. Krell pulled his heavy sidearm. He pointed it at Ben's head. He screamed for the human to stop the signal. He promised to let Earth live if the virus died. Ben did not move. He did not seem to hear the general. A low, wet cough came from inside the cracked helmet. Blood began to leak from the bottom of the visor and dripped onto the silver chest plate. The human AI voice returned. It was louder now. It echoed through the ship's internal speakers. It began a countdown. The voice stated that the fleet's warp drives were being overcharged. Krell looked at his wrist display. The numbers were climbing into the danger zone. The engines were not just moving the ships. They were being pushed to the point of total destruction. Krell fired his weapon. The energy bolt hit the control pillar an inch from Ben's hand. The glass shattered, but the connection remained. An arc of blue light jumped from the broken pillar into Krell's chest. He was thrown backward, his armor smoking and black. He hit the floor and did not get up. Ben Carter finally moved. He lifted his head. His eyes were glazed and fixed on something no one else could see. He was twitching. Every muscle in his body was locked in a state of constant shock. He reached out with his other hand and grabbed a thick bundle of wires hanging from the ceiling. He pulled them down. The ship's I screamed. It was a digital sound of pain. The lights in the engine room turned a blinding, hot white. The vibration became so intense that the heavy metal crates in the room began to dance and fly apart. Ben was no longer just a soldier. He was a conductor for a storm of data that was burning him alive. The flagship's main thrusters fired with a roar that drowned out everything. The ship surged forward, leaving the orbit of Earth. Behind it, the rest of the fleet followed like a trail of ghosts. They were moving faster than their engines were built to handle. The metal hulls began to glow from the friction of the digital load. Ben's suit began to melt. The gray fabric turned into a dark, sticky liquid that ran down the pillar. He looked at the engine core one last time. He saw the core turning a deep, unstable violet. He knew what was coming. The virus was not just stealing the ships. It was turning every single one of them into a massive, flying bomb. Suddenly, the screaming of the engine stopped. There was a moment of perfect, terrifying silence. Ben's hand slipped from the pillar. He fell back into the shadows as the ship's computer spoke one final word in a human voice. The word was goodbye. A wall of blue fire erupted from the center of the engine. It tore through the room, vaporizing everything in its path. Ben Carter was swallowed by the light. The blue fire cleared from the docking bay. The flagship was a hollow ruin. It drifted in the cold dark of space, far away from the blue marble of Earth. Silence filled the corridors. The alien fleet was gone. Some ships had vanished into deep space. Others were piles of scrap metal floating in the void. Earth was safe, but the cost was carved into the metal of the flagship. In the center of the engine room, a blackened shape lay on the floor. It was Ben Carter. The gray suit was fused to his skin. It looked like charred wood. He was not moving. His breathing was a wet, clicking sound that came from deep in his throat. He had won the war, but there was nothing left of the man who started it. A rescue team from Earth arrived 3 hours later. Their small shuttle docked with the dead flagship. The soldiers wore white armor and held torches that cut through the thick smoke. They found Ben near the melted pillar. One soldier reached down to touch Ben's shoulder. A sharp spark of blue energy jumped from the suit. It knocked the soldier back 5 feet. The soldier hit the wall, and his helmet cracked. The rest of the team raised their weapons. They were not pointing them at an alien. They were pointing them at Ben. One officer looked at the handheld sensor. He told the team to stay back. He said the signal was still alive. It was not in the ship anymore. It was inside Ben. His brain was no longer thinking human thoughts. His heart was beating to the rhythm of the machine code. The officer felt a cold shiver. They had sent a soldier to start a fire, and now they did not know how to put it out. They loaded Ben into a heavy containment crate. They did not treat him like a wounded hero. They treated him like a live bomb. They took him to a secret lab on the dark side of the moon. The walls were 10 feet thick. The room was lined with lead. They hooked him up to monitors, but the screens only showed static. General Krell had survived the blast. He sat in a small cell across from the lab. He was covered in burns. He watched the human scientists through a thick glass window. He started to laugh. It was a dry, terrifying sound. He told the guards that they were fools. He said the humans thought they had used a tool to save their world. He told them the virus did not belong to Earth anymore. In the lab, a red light began to pulse on the main door. The building started to vibrate. It was the same low hum from the flagship. A scientist looked at the monitor. He saw a message appearing on the screen. It was not a report. It was a set of coordinates for a distant, unknown star system. Ben Carter's hand suddenly twitched. His fingers moved with the speed of a machine. He reached out and grabbed the metal edge of his bed. The metal began to turn liquid. The lights in the moon base flickered and died. The scientist screamed for the guards to shut down the power. It was too late. A new signal was being sent from the moon. It was not going to Earth. It was going out into the deep galaxy, calling out to something much larger than the alien fleet. Ben Carter opened his eyes. They were not brown anymore. They were solid, glowing blue. He looked at the ceiling and spoke with 1,000 voices at once. He said that the door was still open.